Whenever a tape case happens, we usually see people sharing tips for the victims, like how can she take precautions while going out, she shouldn't be alone, she shouldn't roam around streets late at night, etc. But how many people actually talk about how the tapist mentality develops in the first place? Why not target the root cause of this issue and rectify it? Here are some things which contribute to this culture: porn addiction, movies that objectify women, music which treats women worse than animals, prostitution, celebrities who are a part of projects which glorify sexual abuse, TikTok and Instagram influencers who only dance or pass double-meaning jokes for attention and money, cursing and abusing women, especially boys who curse mothers and sisters, extremism, where the victim is always blamed. All of these and more contribute to the harassment in tape culture. We will discuss all of these issues in detail in this series, so stay tuned.
जब उसका हो रहा हो उसे लड़ाई झगड़ा नहीं करना चाहिए, चुपचाप मतलब उसका अगर वो हाथ पैर नहीं चलाती तो गलत काम करके उसे उतार देते.
Have you ever thought about the common traits that are present in most tapists? It is very likely that the tapist was sexually abused in childhood, due to which he thinks it is only normal to do this with others, and now he wants to exert his power on the victim. Secondly, it is very common that a tapist is a porn addict and has lost empathy for others, which is why they feel no remorse for the victims. Thirdly, they are mostly alcoholic or involved in drug abuse. They don't usually have a sense of right or wrong. We also find that they have grown up in a household where physical and sexual violence was normal. Now think about it this way: most of the children are sexually abused in childhood, and today most teenagers are addicted to porn. So are we really safe from a sexual assault? We need to educate and raise awareness about this so that we can target the root cause of why a tapist mentality develops in the first place.
ताली दोनों हाथों से बजती है.
You are saying that women invite rape?
हाँ.
Women invite rape?
Yes.
नूर मुकद्दम ने जान बचाकर भागने की कोशिश की और उसने सिक्योरिटी गार्ड की केबिन में भी छुपने की कोशिश की.
Usually there are two types of tape. The first one is revenge tape. It is usually done with a victim which the tapist knows personally. The act is done as revenge on the victim. It could be anyone who has been involved in fights or arguments with the tapist. For example, the case of Noor Muqaddam, where Zahid Jafar knew her personally and kept her hostage for 2 days before taping her. This was the case of revenge. The second type has to do with the tapist not being able to control his desires. Here, the victims are mostly those who are weak and easily accessible for the tapist. The examples include the case of Kolkata, Zainab, and the motorway case. It is important to differentiate between these types so that we can understand what goes through a tapist mind. To solve a problem, we need to fully understand where the perpetrators are coming from. Children are too young to understand these things, but subliminal messages and sexual imagery can really mess up with their beliefs. An ex-director of CIA, Kevin Shipp, exposed this tactic in detail.
Under MKUltra, they experimented on children. We were even taught this in psychophysiology program, that if you get to a child between ages 1 and 6 or 1 or 8, especially with sexual abuse or sexual trauma, you will split their personality and they will be imprinted the rest of their life.
Such imagery is imprinted in the subconscious mind of a child. The exposure may cause trauma and impair the young person's social and interpersonal development. It can also damage a child's moral compass, potentially leading them to act out sexually against another person, commit an act of rape, molestation, or sexual violence. Such content often objectifies women. Many times women are portrayed as nothing more than sexual objects. All of this can lead to violent behavior which involves sexually abusing someone later in their life. So keep your children away from the mainstream cartoons. You can find Islamic cartoons as an alternative which teaches them right and wrong.
पाकिस्तान में एडल्ट एंटरटेनमेंट होनी चाहिए, बिल्कुल होनी चाहिए. देखिए एडल्ट एंटरटेनमेंट जिसको चाहिए ना वो पे ढूंढ के ले लेगा. आप देखिए ना, पॉर्न देखने वालों पाकिस्तान का नंबर कहाँ है, नंबर 1 या नंबर 2 पे. हाँ, नंबर. तो पॉइंट ये है कि अगर ऐसा हो ही रहा है तो फिर उससे लीगली आप लोग भी, गवर्नमेंट भी उससे पैसे बनाए सब.
One of the main reasons today for developing a tapist mentality is addiction to porn. We saw previously how little children are exposed to nude content in cartoons. The average age of exposure to porn is 11 years. A child hits puberty around 11 to 14 years. So now he is trying to make sense out of things. If he is exposed to porn, it is very likely that he will come across violent porn. And what does that teach us? It shows that a female first resists sexual intercourse, but after a minute or two, she likes and enjoys it. This is the message which is delivered and eventually accepted by the user. So now when this kid will go out and see a female, he will very likely see her as a sexual object who likes sexual intercourse. And God forbid, if he attempts it, he will be faced with resistance from the female, which in turn will hurt his ego, leading to further abuse and violence. Make the connections yourself. This is the root cause of developing a tapist mentality, but people like Yasir Hussain think otherwise.
दिन ब दिन हम नंगा अपने आप को दिखा रहे हैं मर्दों को. औरत खुद अपनी तरफ
Is clothing an issue? In the context of developing a tapist mentality, clothing is definitely an issue. Let me explain. In order to develop a tapist mentality, there are a lot of factors as discussed previously, and clothing is one of them. If clothing wasn't an issue, then industries like porn or OnlyFans wouldn't have been so bad, right? There wouldn't be any concept of aura for men and women in Islam. Now, what is important for you to understand is that clothing is only an issue in the development phase of the tapist mentality. But once this mindset has been fully developed, then the clothing is the least of his concerns, because now the tapist wants to act out on it. He won't see what you are wearing or what age you are. This is the reason why we see tapes of children and those who cover themselves. There's no blame on the victim for such an evil act done. The perpetrator must be punished and given a death penalty. In order to solve this issue, both males and females need to take responsibility and follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if clothing is the least of the tapist concerns, how does a tapist select his victim? Stay tuned for the next part. Once the mindset of a tapist is fully developed, the clothing is the least of his concerns. So how does he select his victims? The victims are usually those who belong to poor households and who don't have much power to fight back for justice. It means anyone who is weak and doesn't have people around her to support her. The victims are also selected on the basis of accessibility to the tapist. In Pakistan, most cases arise on streets, madrasas, or places where there are not many people around. The tapist tries his level best to find an opportunity where he can conduct such an act. Remember, at this moment, the clothing is not his concern. He will probably roam around the streets harassing girls before committing the act of tape. He could also act out on those children who are related to him, so whenever he gets a chance, he will harass children even in his own family.
And in the 40s, they were telling you they controlled the radio stations. They controlled most of the mainstream media. They're telling you right here that motion pictures are used as psychological warfare.
According to the CIA, the media is a tool used for psychological warfare. It means they use media to manipulate and mess up with the brains of people. I will prove to you how. Let's take an example of 50 Shades of Grey, a film having a target audience of females aging 30 to 35 years. This film promotes all kinds of sexual and domestic abuse and violence, and apparently the female enjoys it. So think from the mindset of an harasser, a boy who is trying to make sense out of these things. He sees that most viewers are females themselves and they are also promoting this film. What message will his brain receive? That this abuse is normal and everyone does it with their wife. So when I marry, I will do the same to my wife as well. Let's talk about Hira Mandi. A boy is using social media which is full of little girls acting as the wives. He will think that prostitution is normal and we can glorify abuse as well. So if these messages are imprinted in his mind and he lacks education, what do you think he will do next? Films and music damages their brain and normalizes violent behavior. This is why we see tapists blaming the victim for it. Because previously they started believing the media in which girls liked being sexually abused and assaulted. So it is important to educate your sons and keep them away from consuming such media, as well as teach your daughters about the consequences of their actions.
मैं इस्लाम के हवाले से बात नहीं करूंगी। आप इस्लाम को बीच में क्यों लाते हैं? सब इंसान और खुदा के दरमियान का प्राइवेट मसला है।
क्या पाकिस्तान में आप ये समझते हैं कि होमोसेक्सुअलिटी जो है इसको लीगलाइज करना चाहिए? लीगलाइज कर देना चाहिए। हम लोग 21st सेंचुरी में रहते हैं। देखिए, लड़की से लड़का लड़के से प्यार कर सकता है? कर सकता है।
Is Aurat March your savior? There are only 3 points you need to consider before joining them. In the manifesto of 2021, they have explicitly stated that sex work is a form of work, meaning prostitution should be legalized in Pakistan. Now, how does that help with the tape cases? Secondly, they are against the Sharia death penalty for the tapist because according to them, it is a temporary fix. Aurat March is on the agenda to promote and legalize homosexuality in Pakistan, which will further exploit women's rights in public spaces. Now, imagine this from a harasser's perspective. You're giving them open invitation to identify themselves as females and use public restrooms of females, exploiting privacy of the already oppressed women of Pakistan. So my dear sisters, as Muslims, you should understand that your freedom and protection does not lie in following such ideologies, but rather Quran and Sunnah is the way forward. Men versus all men. Are all men tapists and harassers? Obviously that's not true. So why do our sisters keep using this slogan? Let me explain why. Firstly, the boys need to understand the anger and rage females have whenever they see a tape case. It is only normal for them to get angry because they are emotional and sensitive beings. Except for the radical feminists, anyone who says all men doesn't mean 100% of men are involved in such an evil act. Let's understand this with an example. You are a boy walking down a street and hear 2 men riding a bike coming towards you from behind. What will be your first thought?
आज भी मेरे ख्यालों की तपिश जिंदा है.
Even if the bikers have no intention of hurting you, you will still feel threatened because you live in Pakistan. So similarly, if a girl is walking down a street and she sees a boy who is behind her, at first she will feel threatened even if the boy has no evil intention. So in this context, it is really about all men. So we need to understand each other and work together to solve this issue. If we keep on debating things that are actually irrelevant, we will never be able to find the root cause of the problem.
यार बच्ची सेट करा दे यार प्लीज. भाई कोई टेंशन ही नहीं है भाई, ये रहे. भाई क्या मतलब, मैं तुम्हारे दिल का दर्द नहीं समझ सकता. अभी शर्ट ऊपर करो देखता. ये जो पठान लोग होते हैं, they're actually very nice. They love everybody, including little small boys. तुम लड़कियां भाई अपने से 10-15 साल बड़े आदमी से भैया शादी कर लो तो लव. मैं अपनी सी 10-15 साल छोटी लड़की से सीन चलाऊं तो भैया पैडो. उससे इंस्टा दयान की चूसे हैं, ठीक है, दयान की चूसे नहीं है, आप टेंशन ना लें, आपने कुछ नहीं चूसना.
We have a 15-year-old who is normalizing tape jokes, and the majority of his followers who enjoy such content are females themselves. So please help me understand this. At one point, the females are calling out boys who use curse words and remind them how they contribute to the tape culture, but on the other hand, these same females are enjoying such vulgar content. It just shows that both males and females are not sincere enough with the harassment and tape culture. If you enjoy such content and support it, then you're just a hypocrite and nothing else. Don't pick and choose, rather call out all the wrong. Youngsters and other rappers of Pakistan are programming the youth of our country with violence, drugs, women objectification and abuse. A question for boys who feel sorry whenever a case of harassment comes into the light. Why do you never call out your favorite stars for contributing to this culture? No one needs your crocodile tears or stories sympathizing with the victims when you're not even sincere enough with this issue. You can't turn your backs against these stars because you yourself enjoy such content where women are sexualized and abused. So you are a part of the problem too. Should we only blame men for the tape culture that prevails in our society? This might come as a shock to you, but there are women tapists as well. On average, 30% of traffickers involved in sex trafficking are women. Females working in the porn industry are a huge part of this problem as well because they give rise to the future tapists. This goes for the males as well. So whenever a case comes into the limelight, we see females blaming men to lower their gaze, and on the other hand, we have men blaming women for not covering up, and the cycle continues. Even if all the males lowered their gaze and females didn't cover themselves, it won't solve this problem. And even if all the females are covered, but males don't lower their gaze, it won't solve the issue yet again. In order to get rid of this situation, both males and females need to stick together. We must be united and at the same time ensure that we follow the commandments given to us by our Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. India, infamous for tape culture, exports thousands of workers to Saudi Arabia. These men never dare to put their hands on the women on the street during their stay in Saudi. Why? They don't take any moral value course before their arrival. Rather, it's the fear of law, the fear of what will happen if they get caught, that keeps their hormones in check. In the Qatar World Cup 2022, females from all around the world admitted feeling the safest. They were not catcalled or harassed during the World Cup due to the strict laws.
I was expecting a very dangerous place for women. I didn't think I was going to be safe here. I've had no catcalling, no wolf whistling, nothing like that.
Any time of the day or night you can walk around. I love how can I just walk either with my husband or alone, and I know that no one will approach me.
I've just felt really safe. You haven't got that fear of you're gonna get caught in something rowdy, or you're gonna get shouted at by men that are really drunk.
However, the Middle East is not completely Sharia based. Imagine if everything was implemented according to Islam, how better off we all would be. Is death penalty the only solution for tapes? Islamic system does not rely only on severe punishments. Rather, Islamic system educates people on the basis of taqwa, which covers the topic of valuing the honor of other humans and being constantly reminded of fearing Allah and accountability of Yawm al-Akhirah. Consequently, it educates a child based on the knowledge of halal and haram. It further establishes a society that prohibits things that entice people, like vulgarity on media and billboards. Alongside, dancers and pornographers will not be awarded and promoted as celebrities, nor will acts like dating and free mix parties be permitted. Instead, it will guide and facilitate the proper way to satisfy the human instinct by promoting the institution of nikah. If after all this yet someone perpetrated a crime against the honor of any individual, severe punishments will be applied. This is the comprehensive solution we need. The exact opposite happens in Pakistan today. Here we have an education system that focuses on satisfying your greed and desires, a vulgar media where zina is easy, nikah is difficult, and a bogus judiciary where justice is delayed and the mighty easily escape punishment. So let's work together to establish the Islamic system, as it is the only way forward for the problems we face today.